All right, so welcome to our next meeting, where in this one we'll cover sort of the basis of almost all applications in graduate school. That is sort of the essays and the web applications and sort of the letters of recommendation that you'll be asked for when you're applying to a graduate program, whether that be a PhD or a master's. So we'll go over sort of like the requirements that most programs have and sort of go off some of the common elements that they have. So stuff like statement of purpose, personal statement, research statement, as you can tell from those names, they're essays that you got to write. And you got to write each essay for each college. So you also got to get some letters of recommendation, and we'll give you some tips on how you can get those letters. Some of them will ask you for your CV or resume, although most times it'll be like CVs because it's academia. They'll also sometimes ask for GRE scores, but there's been a movement where some schools are no longer requiring the GRE, making it optional. And then there's transcripts that should be fairly straightforward. Then there's like application fee waivers and sort of like tips for organizing your application materials. And so, all right. So here's the thing. Each program is going to have their own set of requirements. It's not like undergraduate where most colleges have like what's known as, I believe, the common application, where you could just fill that out and just send it off to many universities. I'm not sure if that's still used. It's been a while since I've been a high schooler going into undergrad, but from what I remember, that was something that you had. Unfortunately for graduate school, that's not the case. So you got to tailor each application to each program, and you have to read the requirements very carefully. So this here, like I took the screenshot from the UH Physics graduate program. They sort of have like a frequently asked questions. And so here they list sort of like the basic requirements of what you'll need, how many people they accept. So like here at like number 6, they look at the student's grades. So like transcripts, recommendation letters, GRE, TOEFL, if I guess you're international, I believe, and personal statement. So this again, taking the time to read the requirements will save you a lot of hassle and will prevent any mishaps from happening when you submit your application. And if something confuses you, this is a perfect opportunity to reach out to the program and sort of ask them. And I would make sure you actually contact the programs, because sometimes the department doesn't do a good job of updating their website or keeping it up to date. So it's best to make sure that what's currently on the website is good. So let's say in just a general scenario, what we recommend on average, you'll apply to like 5 to 10 programs. And so that means you will have 5 to 10 applications that you will have to fill out. And so what most of these applications contain is you'll have like the web application. So that's like the web portal that they have up, the website where you'll make your login and sort of fill out your name, contact, any honors, that sort of stuff, list off where your school is, very basic information to know to make a profile about you. And then there's going to be a section where they're going to have where you can upload your essays, and they'll have like the essay prompts, or they'll just say upload statement of purpose or personal statement. Whichever one, it's very important to make sure to check if they have like a prompt for the essays, because sometimes they do, and it would be in your best interest to enter those prompts. So transcripts, sometimes they'll ask for unofficial or official. Unofficial, I believe you can get through like the UH PeopleSoft self-service, I believe. And official, I think there's a process to that. I'm not sure if they're still charging for official transcripts from the University of Houston. That I have to check. They'll also ask for your GRE scores, resume, CV, coursework history. So even though they ask for your transcripts, what's one thing some programs will do that I found to be kind of asinine is they'll ask you to like fill out this PDF of like coursework that you've taken, and which kind of seems like a little weird because they're already asking for your transcripts, but I think it's just more of a bureaucratic thing that they do. And letters of recommendation, how many? On average, 3 letters. They might ask for less or they might ask for more, although it's typically best to have 3 with 1 extra being as a backup, just in case. And then again, some programs will have specifics beyond these basic components, or they'll have something that just is interchanged. So instead of like a statement of purpose, you'll have like a personal statement, that sort of thing. And there's distinct differences between the two. So we'll go over in depth some of the common application components. So for starters, we'll go off with the statement of purpose. So this essay is tasked with you trying to convince the admissions committee that you will succeed in their graduate program. So they may have a prompt, like I previously said, which you should follow. And the typical structure of like a statement of purpose, it typically has where you introduce yourself, sort of like your interests and what motivates you. And then you want to summarize your undergraduate experience or any relevant experience that you have that you believe will like help your case in being admitted into the graduate program. So that could be research activities, maybe work that involves some sort of that can closely correlate with your research interests, or can help or develop some skills in that job that can help you in your PhD. Maybe some extracurricular activities. Maybe you were like an officer in like an organization, or you like did some after school tutoring, something to like really showcase that you're well-rounded and that you have been active in the community and not just like solely focused on academics, which is important, but it should also be noted that having these extracurricular activities gives your application some extra depth and helps you stand out amongst the other applications. And so you want to discuss any relevance of your current or recent endeavors. Maybe there's an experience that might not be like research oriented or extracurricular activity, but you feel has some relevance. And you want to, and this is important, you want to express and explain why you're interested in their program. So it may seem that they have like this really awesome field in the department that you really want to be a part of, or they have your specific research interest that no other college has. You should talk about that, and you should like name drop some professors, because it shows that you've been doing some research on the program. And then at the very end, sort of like list off what your future goals. Like one common thing I would suggest is like, where do you see yourself, like say 5 years after your PhD or after your PhD? Something to let the admissions committee know that you are motivated, that you have an ambition and a drive to excel and achieve your goals. So this essay is my example. So the page limit depends on the program. They might have like a word limit. They might not have a page limit, but I typically like to keep mine at 2 pages. So this first paragraph, again, I list off how I became interested in particle physics and what really drove me in there. I liked working with hardware, working with the equipment that they had, and these photomultipliers to detect particles. And then these next paragraphs, I sort of describe like, okay, I started working with a graduate student at Princeton University to just like simulate some positron emission tomography scanners. And so that really, helped me develop my C++ skills. And, I'm drafting a manuscript, and, I got experience through that. And so I then segue into my other research experience. Using my prior experience, I was able to get a internship at the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory. And I described what I did there and what I learned there and what I contributed to that lab. And then after that, I started talking about my extracurricular activities, how I started doing more outreach with the STEM Center, building physics demonstrations for Houston schools to come in and sort of like learn more about physics through physics demonstrations. And then in sort of the second to last paragraph, I sort of talk about, okay, here's why I want to go to Rice. I see that you're doing this experiment, and I'm really interested in this type of experiment, especially in my field, and what I can learn by doing a PhD here. And here I name drop some professors, so Dr. Tunnel, Dr. Shenguin, what they have to offer and what I can learn and what I can bring to the table. And so here I list up sort of like what I enjoy to do in the conclusion, you know. So again, if you follow the structure, it should be pretty easy to sort of like fill in and sort of tick off the boxes and make sure that everything is covered. And so again, those last 2 points about future goals and why you want to go to their program is quite crucial. So along with like, expressing why you're interested in your field. So now we move on to the personal statement. So this one is a little more freeform in the sense that you talk about yourself. So in the sense that the difference between sort of like a statement of purpose and a personal statement is that you can think of a statement of purpose as like a mixture between a personal statement and a research statement. Whereas a personal statement, you don't really talk about sort of like your research experience or the more technical aspect of your research. You talk about yourself as an individual and your experiences that could be relevant to your graduate degree plan. So, this again is supposed to highlight you as a character, your achievements, and this is a chance to be sincere. And you have to be sure that everything you write, especially if you have a page limit, has to be relevant to the program. Because when you have page limits, you don't have a lot of room to have a lot of fat. You gotta make a lot of room for the meat and convince why you are the type of person that should be admitted into their PhD program. So Larissa, can you talk about your personal statement here?
Yeah, so most of the programs that I applied to actually asked for a personal statement and a research statement. So if you're going into like CMB or biology, biochemistry stuff, they're probably going to ask you for a personal statement and a research statement. So another thing that I want to point out that Alejandro didn't really go over in the last slide is that your personal statement is also an opportunity for you to kind of like address any shortcomings in your application or, grades, grade wise, undergraduate research wise, stuff like that. Like if you had like a traumatic life experience or something like that, something that was holding you back from, accomplishing your full potential, then that's something that you can address in your personal statement. So for my personal statement and for most of the ones that I wrote for my applications, it was a 1.5 to 2 page statement. And another thing that you really don't want to do for your statement of purpose or your personal statement is like start from the beginning. Like, oh, when I was a child, I loved playing with bugs and that made me want to do entomology. Like, no, like they don't want to know about your early childhood. So for me, I started off with like my undergrad degree. So I was really torn between biology and classical literature, and I actually did a degree in both, but I started off my personal statement with saying like, hey, I did both of these degrees, but biology challenged me more intellectually, so that's what I ended up going with. I pointed out like, okay, when did I like really figure out that I wanted to do biology? It was when I took genetics because this professor inspired me and I got into a lab as a result of that class. And then I wrote a little bit about like, okay, I am in this research group. I've done this type of research before. And that type of research has shaped me into, someone who wants to pursue science and someone who can think critically, someone who can like you fill in the blank with adjectives that, research has like crafted you into this type of person that wants to pursue a graduate degree. And then I also put in my experience with SACNA. So I've been an officer in SACNAS for a really long time. So I put, I've make sure you guys are muted. I put in my leadership experience with SACNAS and, what we were trying to accomplish as a chapter. And then I did what Alejandro said as far as kind of name dropping professors in my research statement and my personal statement. But actually it depends on the program you're applying to as far as like whether or not you want to do this, because this particular statement was for Baylor College of Medicine. And when I got there for the interview, they were like, why are you name dropping? Like, you know, we're doing rotations here, right? Like, we don't want you to know exactly like who you want to work with yet, because we want you to be open-minded about, you know, doing rotations. So I would really encourage you before you do that to determine whether or not your program is the type of program that does rotations and stuff like that, because it seems to me from my statement that they thought that I was more closed-minded about like working with people in Baylor, because like they had this mindset of like, oh, she has already decided who she wants to work with, so rotations aren't going to be a benefit here. So yeah, make sure you know all you can know about your program before you write the statement, and make sure that you are including everything they want you to include.
All right, thank you. So now we go on to sort of the research statement, which is what Larissa alluded to. So here's where you're going to talk more about the technical aspects and the research experience that you've accrued. So here you'll talk about your research projects that you've been a part of, you know, give a brief background, talk about any methods that you've employed, what you learned, any skills that you've gained, and what were the results. Did you see what you postulated? You know, it also bonus points if you can also include sort of like the research question that you were trying to resolve, or that your lab is trying to resolve, and sort of see what your results sort of like answer in terms of the research question, or if they answer any like supplementary questions. And so you also want to talk about any research contributions you've done. So like, did you I guess develop a new method, or something like that? And what about presentations or papers? Did you give a poster presentation? Did you give a talk? If so, where? It's very good to sort of like list off that hey, I've done this research and I've presented it. You know, I have experience communicating the science that I do. And that's really, really a crucial thing that scientists need to have, is this know-how of how to communicate the research to other people who could be within their field or outside their field. Very important. And here's a scenario that some people might find themselves in, is that they might not have a research experience. And so I want to say right now that even though it doesn't explicitly say it in some PhD programs or master's programs that you need a research experience, you don't really need it. It does get a little more difficult in terms of like convincing the admissions committee to come in and to take you in and like be a part of the program, but research experience is not really a requirement unless the PhD or master's program specifically says so in their solicitation. And so what do you do in this interest? So in this case, you can actually talk about what interests you as in terms of research. You know, take this time to formulate a research question. You know, one thing that you could also do is sort of do a little research on some papers, you know, pull up some papers, see what's out there, and then you could reference those papers in your research statement, you know, to sort of like demonstrate that you have been thinking about this. And then you could say design an experiment with some methods on how you could carry out your research and to answering your research question. Like I said, reference literature, and then how the future institute that you will be attending will help you to answer this research question. So that's one piece of advice I can give for those who don't have research experience and are applying right now to graduate school. And so this research statement is also from Larissa.
Yeah, one thing that I want to add is like, I feel like it gets wildly more difficult if you don't have research experience. So if you don't have research experience yet and you're trying to apply, you need to get on that like ASAP. And if you need help, let us know because we're here to help you. Or let your mentor know. It's up to you. So for my research statement, they actually limited it to 1 page. So you kind of have to be very concise with what you're saying here. One thing that I have been going over with my mentees a lot is you need to have a very specific and concise research interest statement. And that's going to help you a lot. So literally the first paragraph of my research statement is like my research interest statement. It's changed a little bit since I wrote this, but basically like I am interested in genome structure and gene expression, specifically epigenetics and transposable elements. So you need to know like pretty clearly what you want to do for your graduate work. It helps a lot. And then basically you go into either, if you have research experience already, into, okay, the main hypothesis, the main research question that we're trying to answer is this is how we did it or how we're planning on doing it, and this is what we got, or this is like preliminary data, or this is what we expect if you don't have data, because that also happened to me. I didn't have data when I was writing this, so don't let that scare you if you don't have data yet. And I think something that really helped me during interviews as well is like, it's not bonus points or anything if you know what the research question is. Like you need to know what the research question is if you're doing research. Like if you don't know the why behind what you're doing, like they're not going to be very confident in letting you into their program. So you really need to know the why behind the experiments that you're doing. And then as far as like other stuff, like if you've done any REUs or study abroad, you can add that to this as well. I studied abroad in the Galapagos, so that last paragraph there is basically the same thing, like, oh, what research question are we asking? What did we find? And stuff like that. And then one thing that I kind of highlighted in that last paragraph was that I've done field work and I've done lab work. And I prefer lab work because, you know, it's more control and I have like, I prefer the pacing of lab work as opposed to field work. So definitely include everything, not just, you know, the stuff that you've done in your lab if you have done other stuff like study abroad or REU opportunities like that.
All right, thank you. So now we move on to the letters of recommendation. So this is another critical component in your application, and who you ask can really help or break your application. So, which is important why you should take the time to consider who you can ask for these letters. So the criteria that I recommend is sort of someone who knows you quite well. So not some professor who has had one interaction in a class with you throughout the entire semester. That doesn't really help your case. Ability to conduct research. So this person could be the professor who's advising you during your research as an undergraduate. That's a prime person to ask for a letter of recommendation because they can speak on your work ethic when it comes to research, your academic achievements. They must be able to speak about your strengths as an applicant. And possibly this is also another area besides the personal statement where they can address any shortcomings in your application, you know, so that way the applications committees knows like, okay, we have to take this into consideration as well. And like I said, a weak letter might work against you. And so when you're asking for these letters, one of the things you want to do is you want to ask them if it's going to be a strong letter of recommendation. And we'll talk about tips. And so one thing that's good about letters of recommendation is that they don't need to be program specific. So when it comes to these letters, the letter writers will just have to write one letter, and then they will just have to send it out to all the other programs, unless the program has like some specific way of submitting or like some specific requirement or restriction on these letters of recommendation. I've never seen or heard of like restrictions in my field per se, but in different fields, your mileage may vary. So, but again, they're not going to have to write a specific letter of recommendation for each program. It's basically just going to be almost a one size fits all in most cases. So again, tips for obtaining a letter of recommendation. So like I mentioned, principal investigator, that's the professor who you work under doing research. Maybe a professor in an advanced level course that knows you and you did presumably very well in, or it could be an employer in a job that's related to your field. So maybe you worked at some company for an internship at engineering and you're applying for like an engineering PhD, and they can actually talk on your work ethic there. Key thing is you want to ask them early, several weeks in advance, months if you can help it. You could do it in person or through email. However, email is preferred because then you would have sort of like a record of when you asked them, and you can like sort of think about what you're going to say to them and sort of explain your situation. And then one of the things you should ask, can you write a strong letter of recommendation for me? It's very important that you say strong, because you don't want a weak letter, because most of the times professors are kind of nice and they'll write you a letter of recommendation. However, if it's a professor that doesn't really know you that well, it might not be a good letter of recommendation. However, if you specifically ask them if you can write a strong letter of recommendation, professors can actually tell you, look, I want to help you and all, but I don't think I can help you in writing the strong letter of recommendation. And believe me, it's better that they don't write you a letter of recommendation if they can't speak strongly about you, because again, a weak letter could actually work against you in some cases. And so one of the things you want to do to these, you want to give to these professors is your CV or your resume as reference, that lists off your education, experience, skills, any extracurricular activities, all like the basic stuff that they can use as sort of talking points for you. Very important, provide them the application deadline. And the other thing is check up and remind them of deadlines. Professors are very busy, and I'm sure other letter writers, employers are also very busy. So it's really, the onus is on you to make sure that they submit on time. I don't know if programs will either reject your application if they don't have the sufficient number of letter of recommendations, or they'll just take however many letters of recommendation you've gotten. However, it's typically best that you try to like meet the requirements that the program is asking you. So if they ask for 3 letters of recommendation, stay on top of your letter writers to make sure that you get 3 letters of recommendation in the end. And stuff happens. It might turn out that a professor might not be able to write it or didn't have time to write it. So it's best to, have a backup, ask someone else in case they can't write a letter of recommendation. You have this other person around the corner who can happily submit another letter of recommendation in their stead. And so now we move on to resume. So resumes are typically 1 page long. In some cases they can be 2 pages, but for the purposes of your current career, it should be 1 page. And most places will typically prefer 1 page unless otherwise stated. So again, this should list your education, your degree, your school, GPA, graduation date, or when you're expected to graduate. Relevant experience, this could be research or work experience that has some relevance to your research or potential to do research in your graduate program of choice. your skills that you may have that are also relevant, and any awards that you may have, extracurricular activities possibly. But at that point, one page, you have to really decide what you want to put on there and showcase to the program. And it's very, very important. You want to be clear and concise. Also have it in black and white PDF. Very important that it's PDF and not like a Word document, because sometimes Word documents can mess up and like the formatting will come out all janky, and you don't want that. Whereas a PDF, it's very immutable, and it's universally used. If you have experiences, or like say like a job experience or research project experience, have dates and be consistent with the formatting, and have a list of emails, and list an email of contact that you will answer in case they want to reach out to you. And again, the program might have guidelines to how they want the resume formatted. So it's very important you check first. So just to give you an idea, this is my resume that I submitted for graduate school. Forget which program I submitted it for, but again, first thing I list off is my education, and then my research, and then I sort of like subsectioned it off to like all the research experiences I've had. So I had a research experience at Fermilab here, where I collaborated with someone at Princeton University and people here at my university, and here where I started out, tinkering around with equipment, and I labeled the dates of how long I've been a part of each research project. Then I list off some extracurricular activities, which I believe is relevant in the program I was applying to, some skills, C++, Python, LabVIEW, all the sorts of skills that would be relevant in your field that you're going into, that you want to showcase. And then at the end, I finish it off with honors, with my most recent accomplishment being at the top. And so now we move on to the CV. And so just so that everyone's aware, because I wasn't aware what exactly a CV was when I was an undergrad, it's Latin for course of life. There's no page limit, and this is typically used in academia. And you can kind of view it as sort of like an extended resume. And really the key difference is that it's really to showcase your credentials to do research, and it's typically detailed. So I believe I found a professor's CV one time that was like 75 pages long. It literally had everything he did. This dude did a lot. And so things, they can get long, and how the format is carried out really depends on your field. And also on you and how you want to be consistent. I would consult with your mentor or professor about this, because it might be that there's some standard that is used in your field for CVs. And so what you put on a CV is, again, career, your education, qualifications, experience, research projects, contributions, any presentations you've given, papers that are relevant that you want to showcase as well. Anything that, again, will highlight that you are qualified to do research in your field. Okay? That's sort of how you can sort of look at it. And so this is my CV. You can tell that it is more than one page as compared to my other resume. This is the one I submitted for graduate school as well. So here, actually, no, this one's actually a more recent one. Yes. Yeah. So my CV is 3 pages long. So I labeled off my GPA. If you got honors when you graduated, I suggest you put that there, nice little badge, you earned it. Some additional researching work experience that I've done, and then here I list off my presentations and conferences, everything I've done. And how you format it depends entirely on you and your field, and so I underlined the conference that I went to and presented at. I had a conference paper that was submitted and presented in Australia. And so SACNAS conferences, I attended those, and then my extracurricular activities, I expand on that. I have more to talk about. So again, CV is typically longer than a resume, and you want to use it to showcase your credentials and your achievements. And it's typically used in academia. All right, and I believe Jake, our other officer here, will take over from here and talk about GRE.
Thanks, Alejandro. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and discuss GRE scores. So this is more along the lines of your results when you get them. So some background information before we discuss that though. Some programs will list a minimum requirement in the actual like application where you're going through. They will have like a minimum score that you should reach or like an average score. I know typically I saw averages of the applicants who were admitted. Some won't list them at all. And this has also been discussed a few times, but they will sometimes be optional. So you need to go through and make sure that GREs are required. A lot of my applications, the GRE was optional where you could submit it. That said, they even say in the application that we won't even view these. I think it was Colorado Denver told me that, and UGA told me that as well. So read the program requirements and be sure what is required if you need to submit the GRE or if you can submit the GRE. Now, when you take the test, the ETS actually allows you to list up to 4 institutions to send free of charge. If I recall correctly, if you do not send them directly after taking the test, you end up having to pay. I might be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works. So you should go ahead and send the GRE scores to at least 4 of the institutions when you take the test for free. And those scores are good for roughly 5 years. Now, each school has an ETS code, so be sure you know those whenever you're submitting the actual for the scores. And if you're still unsure whether or not you need to take the GRE or what the ETS code, or if you have any questions, the best thing to do is to reach out to the admissions office. Typically, they have a person who's in charge of graduate admissions. So for biology and biochemistry, we have Rose, for example. She's in charge of most of our admissions process. That was the person that I was in contact with, and if I had any questions, yeah, I could shoot her a email. Now on the slide here, you can actually see just a very random GRE score. This is nobody in particular that we grabbed. Now, whenever you get the score, how this is weighted, you have a minimum score of 130 all the way up to 170. Now, depending on what you score, it's going to give you a percentile. And most GRE programs go off of the base score. I don't believe they go off of the percentile, but it gives you an idea of how you did compared to the rest of the individuals that have taken the test. So you'll have your verbal reasoning score, your quantitative reasoning score, your analytical reasoning score. They also show you your test score history. So if you've taken it multiple times, it'll show you all of your attempts and subject test scores as well. And then it also has your test recipient, your score recipients if you've sent it. Transcripts are another important aspect of applying to graduate school, very similar to applying to undergraduate. We have to submit high school transcripts. For your graduate school, you have to submit your graduate or your undergraduate transcripts. So every program is going to ask you for transcripts, and they will be either official or unofficial. Typically what I saw was they would allow you to upload an unofficial transcript as a placeholder, but if you're accepted, you do have to send an official transcript, which in my experience does cost a little bit of money. I think it's like $20. So it's always good to kind of just go ahead and grab an unofficial transcript. You also need to upload all of your educational history as PDFs typically. Now, that educational history should include every single school you had attended. So whenever I applied, I had to upload 3 transcripts. I went to Florida Southwestern State College, University of South Florida for a semester, and then I finished my degree at Florida Gulf Coast University. All 3 of those transcripts had to be submitted, including USF, even though I was only there for a semester. You can, for example, with UH, you can actually access your unofficial transcripts through My UH. It's pretty simple. You go through and you just click a few buttons, and it gives you a printout where you can download as a PDF of your transcript itself. You may also, as Alejandro mentioned previously, need to fill out a coursework form, which will tell you your relevant courses that you've taken towards your degree, your cumulative GPA, the grades you've received in those courses, and as well as the GPA in the major.
Can I add something here really quick? So for me, at UH, there's an option to either get like a PDF of your official transcript or to get your official transcript mailed to the institution that you're applying to. Both of them cost like around $20. And I strongly recommend that you figure out whether or not the institution that you're applying to wants it mailed to them. Because I bought the PDF version, and then one of the schools that I interviewed for actually asked me to get it mailed to them. So I had to spend another $20. So make sure you know which one they want.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I know you do have two options. So it's important to know whether or not they want the physical transcript mailed to them so they know who the recipient is, or the digital that's coming from you. It's actually a very good point that I didn't think of. Thanks, Larissa. So another thing that's been discussed is application fee waivers. We all know applications can get expensive, and they do add up. If we're talking $50 each application, sending in 5 to 10 applications. So some institutions do fee waivers. They're not usually times on need basis, as if you can prove that you have a reason for. That might be, sorry, I'm getting internet connections unstable, so if I'm sputtering, that might be why. So if you can prove that, yeah, you require a fee waiver on need basis, the best way to really find out about these application fee waivers is to contact the program specifically and ask, usually that person who's involved in graduate admissions, because they will be able to give you the information on how to access a fee waiver or how to apply for a fee waiver. Some programs also offer fee waivers at national conferences. SACNAS, for example, I believe some schools will actually set up booths and they will offer fee waivers. I believe that's how it works. Larissa or Alejandro, correct me wrong, because I didn't go to those conferences yet. And some scholarship programs also offer fee waivers. Two that specifically that do are the GEM Fellowship as well as the McNair Scholars. So there are options out there for application fee waivers, but you do have to hunt for them a bit.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about the SACNAS fee waivers. So I know a couple of you guys, a couple of you undergrads are applying to present research at the conference this year. So if you do end up going and you do get funded to go to that conference, they have virtual booths since it's going to be virtual this year. So you have to go and like schedule like to meet with representatives from the institutions that you are thinking about applying to. So when you go there, like ask them for the fee waiver while you're there, and they'll probably give it to you. Some of them you have to apply to get the fee waivers, but some of them just give you like here's a code, type in that code whenever it asks you for like payment, and then you type in the code and it's free.
Okay, so this is something I wish I would have done when I was applying for graduate school. And it's a great idea. I did not do this. Everything is just kind of a mess still in my documents folders to this day. Use a cloud service. Use like Google Drive or Dropbox, whichever one you're more comfortable with. Put the programs and universities into their own folders, and also include like a list of deadlines for each application. Now, I did all of this, but I do want to say the idea to use like that cloud service is great. And I really wish somebody would have given me that idea, because you can grab it whenever you need to. You can share that profile folder with your letter writers, as I mentioned here. So you can include your CV, your resume, your list of deadlines in schools, your research posters and presentations, your transcripts, any additional materials that they need for those letter writers. You can just send that to your letter writers and they can just look through it all. So it's a good idea to utilize the cloud when compiling these applications, because God knows that we also know that, imagine if you have all these application materials together and your hard drive dies, right? So let's, I would suggest let that happen, use the cloud. Okay, so thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in. If anyone has any questions, we'll take any questions. You can either go ahead and verbally ask them or throw them in the chat box here. And just a heads up, so our next major meeting is on August 9th at 3 p.m. There's an updated like post and that's going to be covering specifically interviews and going over CVs and resumes that have been created by you. So it's a good idea to go ahead and get these CVs and resumes started now.
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can. Oh, Jamie actually has a few tips, so she can unmute herself and share them with the class.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, so thanks for the opportunity. No, I just used, when I was writing my applications, Grammarly.com, which is a free service that checks all of your, mistakes, commas, everything. I'm horrible at commas, so it's really useful for that. So again, that's a free service that I highly recommend you run all of your statements through. One thing that I would definitely say is it looks weird if you don't include a letter from your research advisor. So that would be something, that looks bad on you. So definitely plan to ask them for a letter as part of your application process. And then for the resume, I believe UH Career Services has a resume critiquing portal or something. So definitely look into the Career Services webpage and see what resources they have there for helping you build your resume. And if anyone knows that they want to continue in academia, so after grad school I want to be a professor, you definitely want to include that as part of your future goals that Alejandro was talking about. They want to know that they're hiring someone who is going to be a colleague of theirs in the future. So that's the last important thing that I thought of. Well, but yeah, the officers are doing a great job. I love it. I'm just here to support you guys.
I want to add two things to that. I want to emphasize on getting a letter of recommendation from your PI. Like whenever you need letters of recommendation, they should be like your automatic go-to as far as that goes. And then I forgot the second thing. If it comes back up, then I'll let you guys know.
Could have been.
But if you guys have any,
it could have been Grammarly.
Grammarly is great. I also use Grammarly. I feel like it was something else though, but I'll figure it out or not. I'll get back to you guys on that. But if you guys have any other questions, we can answer now. You can ask them in the chat or you can ask them in the Discord if you would like. Can't believe that flew out of my brain so quickly.
Thoughts are fleeting, so evanescent.
Rip, dude. I'm tired. I'm sorry.
Maybe then.
If y'all don't have any questions, y'all are free to go. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys are doing great with your mentors. If you guys need any help with anything related to this program, just let us know. And I did take attendance, so. All right, I'm gonna stop recording.